Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Polk County School Board's work session for September 8th, 2020. And hope everybody is having a wonderful day. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our superintendent, Mrs. Jackie Bird, to continue with our work session today. Ms. Bird?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we're going to start with our policy reviews. Ms. Dodge is up front, and she's actually going to start with a staff policy, and then she's going to move through to the Neola policies for you. Mrs. Dodge?
Good afternoon. It's nice to see everybody. The first set of policies we have is just one policy, and that is one of your board bylaws, the technical corrections bylaw. In a meeting that I had with Neola last month, they mentioned that when we originally adopted this policy, we hadn't adopted some of their language. Hello. We hadn't adopted some of the language that they had originally recommended that allows you to do technical changes to policies that are strictly because of statute requirements or changes through the consent agenda instead of having to take them to two hearings like we do with the work session and the board meeting. And so I wanted to bring that to you as an opportunity to, there are always a lot of, not a lot, but there are a significant number of policy changes that we do that are strictly because of statute changes. And so I think that could lessen your workload when it comes to policy updates, and at least bring this as an opportunity for the board to update that technical corrections bylaw and allow the statute changes policies to go through consent agenda and not through two hearings. So that's the recommendation.
Are there any questions on the staff technical policies? Ms. Miller?
So I'm not sure how we're alerting. Hand raising, I guess, is okay. I read that, and I appreciate you to answer my questions earlier about this. The only thing is that I would say is when they do come up, even for technical changes, it gives us a time to review them, because I don't know that we all have a chance to sit down and read through all of these. Mm-hmm. What would you suggest? Is there another time? I think another opportunity for us to review our policies, which we should be abreast of at all times, and those technical changes just alert us to them because we have to see them again. Mm-hmm. So I don't mind reading them. It's just to keep it convenient enough to go on a consent. We can still read them on the consent.
Right, and because they're on consent, just like any other item on consent, you can certainly pull them off if there are any items that you wish to have further discussion on, or want more information about. But if there are things that are just you got
like
it.
Capitalizations and things, technical stuff. Okay, I appreciate that. I'll do it that way. I just wanted to, any time that we can bring forth policy to be reviewed is important because we have so many and things are constantly changing. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the staff technical change policy? Okay, moving forward, we have the Neola policies, which Ms. Dodge is going to bring forward. These are recommendations that we're taking in from Neola based on they're working through as not only just our district, but several others. So Ms. Dodge will walk you through each of those. Thank you.
Thank you. And to start out, I did want to apologize that there are so many this time. I had a set that was originally going to come forward at the August 25th work session, and then that got changed to a superintendent search only. So you're basically getting 2 work sessions worth of policies this time. So I did want to apologize for the number. The first 5 recommendations came out in a new packet from Neola where they're trying to update the policies regarding the superintendent to refer to the appointed superintendent instead of just the superintendent, because there have been some issues in other Florida districts that have come up, especially when they're changing from appointed to, or elected to appointed, or back and forth. And so most of these changes, well, every single one of these policies is adding a reference to the appointed superintendent, and then there are a couple that have additional changes that were required by statute. The first one, employment of the appointed superintendent, adds the anti-discrimination language that we have in all of our other staff policies to the superintendent's to this policy, and then has the language regarding, that was placed into statute regarding if the superintendent doesn't report somebody for misconduct, then it can affect her compensation, his or her compensation. And then the next one, 1030, references the code of ethics. And then the evaluation of the superintendent changes the reference to appointed, and then non-renewal, which is 1040-01, adds a requirement that non-renewal or termination has to be done at a public meeting. And incapacity of the appointed superintendent refers to the appointed, and then refers to FMLA if that there can't be any FMLA violations if for some reason the board does consider the superintendent to be incapacitated. 1210 is an update to the standards of ethical conduct for administrators only, and also adds the language regarding situations where the superintendent's salary can be impacted. 4162 is a result of changes to federal regulations that were updated in January of this year. It places notification requirements, and it requires us to identify the position that will be in charge of training and notification for CDL license holders. And the federal government has a new database that they are using now for reporting violations, and so it requires us to report any violations to that database and to use that database for clearing potential hirees. 5113 is school choice options, and that just changes references to No Child Left Behind, which doesn't exist anymore. We have ESSA now. Graduation requirements. There have been several changes over the past few years to graduation requirements, and this policy was a little behind, and so it is now updated to the current graduation requirements, including the new CTE pathway to graduation, the financial literacy requirements, and online course requirements. In-school discipline just adds the options that we have available as a district for in-school discipline, and allows for students who are sent to in-school discipline to complete coursework while they're there. Authorization to accept and distribute electronic records and to use electronic signature is allowing us, we already do that, and it's just a broadening of the things that we can do it for. And it also, there are a lot of districts that were having issues with Medicaid, and so it specifically authorizes us to use electronic signatures for that purpose. Video surveillance and electronic monitoring is for districts that use this. We use it on our school buses and at our schools because of the new safety regulations. And so it basically outlines the fact that we're doing it, how it can be used, and privacy protections for students when it is used under FERPA. Probably the one you've been waiting for is 745001, which is a new policy regarding protective facial coverings for staff, vendors, and visitors. This outlines the same requirements that we placed in our student code of conduct for students, and covers all other folks at the district. Student abuse and neglect adds the liability protection language that was placed in statute, I want to say 2 years ago. And 8805 is the model policy on religious expression that the department put out, and we are required to adopt that as presented by the department. Home education also is updates due to statutory changes, and it changes the definition of home education, the process for parents to notify the district that they are participating in the program. It outlines our POC-specific policy, which allows students to take up to 3 courses from the district and still be part of home education. And it outlines portfolio requirements and how a parent can say they're not in home education anymore. And those are the policy updates that we have this afternoon. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. I see your hand, Ms. Miller.
I just had a couple that I didn't review with you earlier,
That's
sorry.
okay.
And this might be for the superintendent or staff as well. We talk about the school choice. I guess it's referring to mostly the Hope Scholarship when you talk about persistently dangerous schools. Is there,
No, that's a federal requirement.
that's a federal requirement.
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
talk a little bit about that? And then when it gives the student who's victim of a violent crime the choice to go to a different school, do we provide transportation for that student? Or is that on them to go to a different school and provide transportation?
I don't believe that we're required to provide transportation, but I'm gonna look back and see if anybody knows.
In the past, they have the option to go to a different school, but they would have to be able to provide their own transportation.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And then on the homeschool, because the increase in homeschool, thanks to COVID, only because I have a child who's homeschooled,
Mhm.
the portfolios that are collected, do we have staff, this is a staff question, do we have staff to do increasing reviews? Because my only, and when I talked to our delegation, homeschooling is an option and it's a choice and it works for some students, but there's not a lot of parameters to it. So I don't know that with the increase, do we have staff increasing portfolio reviews, or how is that done?
Do you mean our staff requiring more portfolio reviews, or do we have more requests for portfolio reviews?
Well, it wouldn't be a request, the staff would would have to request to review them, more of them, because we have more homeschool students at this point.
I'll allow Ms. Townley to come up, but I can tell you that once we receive those requests, it's not until they have a completion with it as well. And so we don't know what that's going to look like, because we still have students going back and forth right
Right.
now. So Ms. Townley will actually speak a little bit more about her staff that's in one of her areas, but it's at the completion, Ms. Townley.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So we are making plans for that review, but we also are looking at our numbers in relation to all of our schools and staffing. We did do an additional count here coming up for this Friday before we make shifts in that regard, but we do have plans for that.
Okay, thank you. And my last one, sorry.
That's okay.
The religious, when we talk about the religious exemption or the religious policy that we have here, I know people understand that means every religion and all religions. Can you talk about what other districts are doing, or if they are doing anything to help define some of that? Because we can intend one thing, and then it could be a completely different.
I honestly don't know what other districts are doing, because in statute, we're required to adopt the model policy that the department came up with. I assume that, I don't know that anybody's made any changes or additions to that model policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mrs. Dodge on the Neola policies at this time? Ms. Fields?
Basically, I had a question. I think Ms. Superintendent Burt, you would probably have to answer someone else. I see there's an added piece for financial literacy. Do we have a curriculum that we're utilizing for that?
Yes, we do. Ms. Townley, do you want to kind of give a quick, briefly an overview of that? But we do have a curriculum, and that's been coming for I believe over a year now.
Is this basically coming from the state, or is this something? Okay.
Was that it?
So it used to be required as part of economics, and then last year, the state changed the requirement to make it I'm trying to remember what, it's a course they don't have to take, but they can take. And so we've had to update how we do that, because it's not required anymore. It's just something that students can take.
So I guess Ms. Townley can answer this one, maybe, and if not, you can give it to me later. So we have a curriculum in place, or is this something that's being mandated and funneled through the state?
We have
Right.
standards that are required, and then we have resources that are selected more at a local level to meet the required state benchmarks in that regard for financial literacy.
Thank you.
Thank you. And like I said, they've been working on it for over a year. When they first heard it was coming about, they've been really addressing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Dodge. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. And the next item that's coming before you, as soon as Ms. Dodge switches are over there,
I can't find the little thing.
you're okay.
I'll
Well,
let somebody else do it.
Ms. Barnes is not able to be with us today to review the school improvement plans. However, you should have received some information from her earlier, I think, no, later last week, the latter part of last week. And Ms. Townley is actually going to fill in for Ms. Barnes now to give you the overview of what's coming up and the deadlines, dates for the school improvement plans. These always sit with you for at least 30 days. So she's going to go over that with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We are just asking for you to review our school improvement plans. I believe Mrs. Barnes has shared access with each of you to look at those plans and review them. You can certainly send us any questions or concerns that you may have as you look through that process. But please keep in mind that these are living documents. Schools will revisit them all throughout the year, but at this time, we are working within the current deadline to meet for the submittal to the state by October the 15th. So that is why they are with you. They, as you well know from reviewing them before, they highlight our school demographics, school information, their comprehensive needs assessment, their plans for improvement, as well as their plans for positive culture and environment within the school, and review some of the school's budget goals. So they are before you, and we will be happy to answer any questions you may have as you review them.
Thank you. And again, these are living documents because they do sit. As we go through them, we will see the documents being highlighted and changed and additions and probably deletions, but we don't just scrap it in the middle of the year and start all over. What we do is make an amendment and adjustment within the documents. Oftentimes with our schools that are in need of instructional support, you will see we utilize these documents during our instructional reviews a lot. This is what's going to help drive that work. For those schools, the state actually reviews them as well to make sure that we're meeting all the assurances of any state guidelines for any schools that are in need. But the regionals actually have the documents, they're reviewing the documents, and they're reviewed quite often within their leadership team meetings and actually with the regionals on a one-on-one. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer those regarding the school improvement plans at this time. Okay, thank you. And again, I believe our deadline is October the 15th.
Yes, ma'am.
That is the final time, and we'll submit those up to DOE at that time. Thank you. Ms. Riley Hawkins is coming forward. So as you know, we've had a lot of adjustments this year, and one of the adjustments we've had was in our state assessment calendar. Quite naturally, it could adjust again, just depending on what happens. But we want to make sure this calendar aligns with our calendar for our students and our families, because we know they don't wait to the last minute to do any planning. So we want to make sure we get that information out. So Ms. Riley Hawkins has sent, I believe everyone has the calendar?
Yeah, it is. Judge let me know that it's hard to pull up on this, but everybody should have it attached to the e-agenda. So this is a uniform state assessment calendar. This is provided to us by the state. The first 8 pages are literally built by the state. We as the district fill in the blue column. They're the windows, they're the criteria in which we need to adhere to the state assessments. So we as a district fill in the blue column that says how is Polk County addressing the different required assessments that they have set out for us. So those are the only things that we've edited there. Then we go on to page 9, which ends up being the assessments that we as a district do for progress monitoring. And that's what we have in addition that we're requiring for those that are either in that grade level or in a course. It has to be expected for all of those for us to put it on the calendar. So then that has been put onto page 9. And then the last page summarizes the minutes in which students are going to be required to test. And it goes by each one of the grade levels and the expectations that we have for those minutes. This was built a couple of years ago. We see this every year. We bring it to you, and then we have to post it on the website, and it has to be available for the state to review by October 1st. If you look at it, the state has already started to make changes. We made our last edit on Friday because we're trying to keep it as current, but we do see that this calendar is going to change possibly again. But you can see the state has already marked out reds and greens as they're making edits to the calendar as we roll through this year, and it's very different than any other year for administering assessments. Yes?
not being able to take EOCs last year, how is that reflected in this calendar? Are those students taking them in October, or are they waiting until the next course in the progression?
So the EOCs are offered 4 times a year. The EOCs were waived for the students, but some of them are still an assessment requirement for graduation. But the state has also incorporated, so Algebra 1 would be an assessment requirement to graduate to get a level 3 or higher, but the state has now offered geometry, which if you are in a sequence of courses, that would be kind of the course that you would be in this year, and that has now been put in as an option for students. So with this fall administration, we're offering it to those students that took algebra last year. If they want to take that test, they can. But because it's available, but if they're in geometry, they can take that at the end of the year. Or we also have what we would call comparative scores through the ACT or the PSAT, depending on one of those assessments. So we have multiple ways which they can meet graduation requirement. They don't need to roll back to a course that they actually possibly had the last face-to-face instruction in March, but that's up to them.
How are we communicating those options to those students?
We have sent a letter to all of those that are in geometry right now. We've sent a letter home that's provided the parents and the student knowing every single option and every single assessment that's available. Love to have them take it if they want to, but also know it's not their only opportunity to meet a graduation criteria.
Okay, because my guess would be that it would be our juniors that were in the Algebra 1 last year that are probably going to be the most affected by that. Is that?
Yeah, freshmen tend to be, the ninth graders tend to be in our Algebra 1, unless you had an Algebra 1A and 1B. But we're trying to give as many opportunities and give it to the choice of the parents, but we're not pulling in everybody that didn't test. We're not pulling everybody in. We're letting them know. If they don't respond, then we'll put them onto, putting them into the fall assessment to say, hey, we didn't hear from you, so we're going to put you in as giving you that chance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Miller?
On the other side of that, I'm looking mainly at K-8.
Yes.
Have we made any provisions in regards to COVID and this huge gap that we have in learning? Or are we just pushing them, not we, but the state calendar to match what we're guided to do? Is it just keeping up with what we've always done? Are there any provisions made for the gap in learning that these children have had?
So we have our progress monitoring that we do district-wide, so
Right.
we're trying to use that as far as measures to see where we're at in preparation, because our progress monitoring through Star Reading and Star Math gives us, besides just a scale score or a performance level, it gives us a lot of instructional planning, so we're using that to be able to support the learning, to be able to have the kids on grade level and meeting expectations for the grade level that they're enrolled in.
So they're expected in March to take their standardized tests
Yes.
as if they were learning
Yes.
for the past 6 months.
Yes, the state is requiring that, yes. And I know there are some states out there that are trying to see if they can waive their spring assessments, and I think Betsy DeVos just at the end of last week said, no, that she's not going to waive that we are going to be required, all states will be required to do their spring assessments. Accountability-wise and how we use it may be different, but they are still going to, they feel a value in finding out how our students are doing, and they will do those states.
Are you hearing discussion on how the accountability use of those tests will be?
There are discussions, and they're still going to currently use it as they have prior. A lot of the learning gains have been based on a prior year assessment. That is not available, so students that have a test from 18-19, they will measure that test to how they've performed in 2021 and use that as a measure of a learning gain. That is the current, as of September 8th, what I know. But, things changed right in April for us last year, so things may progress, but at this point, they're wanting to use the accountability system that they have in previous years.
That's correct. And I want to chime in
Sure.
as a superintendent, and we are having conversations, and I had one as recently as last week, giving my feelings on it. With what we see happening in our schools, students are in and out, schools are open and closed, things are up and down, people are flipping back and forth. Being fair, and we understand what they're saying with the accountability that they set out in September, that they were going to use the gains in 5th grade for them, which is one of the ones that we saw a lot of the transition in with those students, because you look at those students that's moved forward from 4th grade that we were really working on to make sure we hone in their skills and get them ready, and then they lost that last 9 weeks. But as a superintendent, one of the things that I did discuss is we don't mind having the assessment, it's how the assessment's utilized. And I've said very clearly, don't know if it'll go anywhere, But I do have to speak not only on behalf of the children of Polk County, but the children all over the state with what we see happening. It's best to utilize the data as a baseline, so we'll know, one, our students ended the last 9 weeks of the year with really no concrete instruction. They're back in, and some are still going back and forth. So my recommendation, again, don't know how far it's going to go. If we have to utilize the assessment, let us utilize it for instructional practices and baseline. So we are having those discussions, but like Ms. Riley Hawkins said, we don't know where it's going to go, how it's going to change, but we are very well having those discussions and making sure that we at least drive our point home. We don't mind the assessment, but we need to use it in a different manner.
Yeah, I appreciate that viewpoint. I think that's the majority of, I'm sure, the board and the staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Reynolds?
And this, I'm not sure if this is a question for staff or it may be a question for Wendy. I don't know if she's still here. But is that more of a DOE decision? Is that something that we need to start talking to our delegation about, seeing if they'll waive for the year? What direction should we go?
It is gonna come down, but you know, everything is actually gonna funnel back up.
Right.
So I think if we look at it not as just Polk County, state of Florida, and eventually everyone is having the same conversation. We're just in a different way of how we utilize our accountability system with testing. So, and I'm pretty sure, I can't speak for all 66 other superintendents, but I can assure you that as we're talking and we're having the heartburns of what we're seeing, we're all going to pretty much feel the same way at the end of the day. So it's going to be DOE, and what we can do is just press upon them our concerns as well. And if the board would like to do that, I would encourage you to, because it's about all of our kids. And we still have kids that are still back and forth within the state in itself.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It probably will have some adjustments, but we're going to post it and make it available as current as we can at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next item that you have coming before you, my computer is doing something crazy here, is Maddie? I saw Maddie. Hey, how are you? Welcome. She's going to come again, as we want to bring forth and make sure that you're aware of some of the Head Start grants that we have coming before you. So she's going to walk you through. You have several documents that you received. One was the budget impact, then you have the summary and the description, but she's going to walk through those with you with that grant that has the total funding.
Good morning, good afternoon, rather. I want to thank you for hearing us out on our third time of making a 5-year grant for Head Start. So we're entering our 13th year of operation, and once again, we were asked to do a non-compete grant, which means no other agency can compete against a district for this grant. That's really great. The items that you have before you is the grant application itself. The federal government has rather specific pieces of documentation that we have to submit. The Head Start job descriptions, you see them all there. And then, of course, the compendium of assurances or certifications is also there. And most of those you've seen on many grants and many contracts throughout the state. Here's the big point. Once again, they're asking us to serve 942 children. You see the budget there. That also includes 80% of the dollars come from the federal government. It's from the Agency for Children and Families, and it's a federal direct grant that comes directly to the county. Most grants are either federal indirect or they're washed through the state. This one does not go through the state. This goes directly from Washington to us here at Polk County. We serve 942 children. Carrie, you have some details there on those service points.
We serve 942 children made up of 25 school campuses and the Winter Haven Head Start location, and that's 54 classrooms. In a normal year, we serve 18 in each classroom, so 36 at each site. However, COVID has impacted us greatly this year. We submitted a plan to the Office of Head Start. Our goal was to open with 660 children, which cut each class to 12 instead of 18 because 3- and 4-year-olds social distancing. And as of today, we are at 508 towards that goal. So we're having difficulty because of COVID recruiting and getting kids enrolled.
That will not be on our 5-year grant, but it is on our current plan, our COVID operational plan. The feds will pay 80% of our grant, and we pick up the other 20 here in our own area. We get that money basically, or the in-kind dollars, basically through 3 things. We have VPK dollars, which the Early Learning Coalition and the school district act as a partner to supply VPK dollars for every 4-year-old that's enrolled in Head Start. We also have our partners, our contracted partners and the like, giving us in-kind dollars. So instead of paying 100% of a particular item, they give it to us at a lower cost, and we could use that as in-kind. And our family services are also considered as in-kind dollars. We did present to you earlier in this school year our need to change from our community service partner in Haines City to public school sites. Now I am deeply appreciative of your support, because I just don't know how we would have done COVID at a community center that large. So now that they're in schools, it seems to be much, much better for us. Are there any questions concerning the grant? Carrie, did I leave anything?
Ms. Reynolds?
This isn't specific to the grant, but with the COVID numbers, normally we have a wait list for Head Start. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
a pretty large wait list, if my
Yes,
memory
ma'am.
serves correctly? Are we thinking that that gap will be filled in the coming weeks? I know we typically see an increase across the district after Labor Day, or
Yeah, yes, all of that is so. You know, one of the things that has really troubled Carrie and I is the number of parents that just don't know what to do. And I'm sure you're seeing this all over the county. This is the first time that they've ever been involved in a formalized educational plan for most of the parents. And so they'll say things like, I'm turning in my application, I'm working hard to get all that paperwork, and then they say, but I don't know if I want my child in school. So that's the barrier that we're overcoming. We, as a district, we should be excited about this. We have not had but one child care center close because of a severe illness on their campus. We did have a child care center close, and they only did that because a family member was sick and they wanted to do a deep cleaning, which is great. So locally, I think we are doing very well with our young children, but I could still understand that many parents are quite concerned about sending their 3- and 4-year-old. Carrie has an experience this last week with a 3-year-old never have been separated from his parent.
It's been a challenge with the parents not being allowed on campus. We've utilized Zoom. We've been connecting. I personally have connected with this family of a 3-year-old and sent her pictures from the classroom to show her what the classroom looked like. I covered the class and let her talk to the parent, to the teacher via Zoom. I mean, their 3- and 4-year-olds have never been away from home, and the parent not being able to come in and visualize the campus and see the classroom and see the exciting things that are happening has been a challenge. And recruitment has been a challenge because we recruit heavy from January to June, and with staff being home because of COVID and most businesses still being shut down, that's been a challenge to get our wait list back up. The numbers are going up. We started the first day of school with only 400, and we're at 508. So parents are starting who decided to stay home because of COVID, who were accepted and met all the requirements, have been calling saying, okay, you guys are doing good for 2 weeks. Everybody's doing good. I think I'm going to try it, and we're enrolling those as well. But we've kind of hit double whammy with not being able to see the classroom and also recruitment efforts being hampered because of businesses being closed and people afraid to be out in the community going door to door and saying, hey, have you heard about Head Start?
okay. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mrs. Fields?
First of all, I want to commend you guys for doing a great job, and the non-compete speaks volume on the hard work that you guys do each and every day. I wanted to know, how is the lower amount of kids going to impact staffing? Are you going to have to look at something different? Are you able to utilize the staff even though you don't have all the kids, or how are you guys working through that?
Well, that is a great question. I wish I had no, I do have an answer. We were provided COVID dollars and CARES Act dollars to sustain staff, whether or not we were in school or not, through September 30. Yes, through September 30. We did meet that cut date, and we're now in school, so they will continue that. I am concerned, as time goes on, that we will cut that service dollar down. I don't know how they will do that. They have not given us an exact plan as of yet, but Carrie has been in contact with our Region 4 leadership, and basically we have attempted to develop a plan, implement the developed plan to have as many children on campus as possible. Carrie, you want to talk about second semester versus first semester?
The goal with opening with the reduced size of 12 was to see how things go, see how our numbers in the district go if our numbers are going down, and as they go down, to gradually increase back up slowly to be fully funded at funded enrollment by the end of the end of the semester, which would be January, to start back at 942.
That's what you're hoping for.
That's what we're hoping for, because
And
that's
I
what we're
think
funded
that's
for.
what, if I could say that, I think that's what Region 4 would like us to push for. Remember, Region 4 are the southern 7 states.
So how can we help? Do you have information that maybe
Give
you
us
can
the
share with us
contact
and we
link,
can
yes.
share with parents? Or
Yes, ma'am. In fact, I did want to compliment and thank greatly Rachel Pleasant's team, because she put our electronic application on the front page of our website, and that really did stimulate some contact. It acted as our #1 way of recruiting this COVID season.
She put the hot link, so before school started back, right from the main page, it was apply to Head Start, and it took you directly to the Head Start page and the Head Start application, because it's kind of hard to get to if you're trying to just stumble upon it on your own. And we saw a dramatic increase in the number. I think we had for July, we had less than 100 online applications for the entire month, and then the 1 week that it went live, we had more than 150 applications.
good.
So that was great. She was instrumental in making that happen for us.
And I have started a conversation with our Early Learning Coalition. They have just over 1,000 applications that are not being serviced, but that's birth through 5. So we have to narrow it down to 3 and 4-year-olds, and maybe our contact, Mark Hutek at the Early Learning Coalition, can help us gather more parents as well.
Thank you.
I think I don't know how else to say this, but I think when the fear dies down, those numbers will continue to come up.
We hope so.
I do too.
But the other factor is that a lot of parents now are working remotely at home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not typically the families that we serve, because they tend to be service area that demand a face-to-face kind of thing. But that's right, it's true.
Thank you.
All the telemarketing people.
I saw Ms. Miller's hand.
Yes, thank you. Right now, there's not a online virtual availability for our preschools. It's not what we offer. Do we work with nonprofits or people that are choosing to keep their children at home? Can we refer them to some kind of learning so we don't get them in at kindergarten with nothing for the people that are choosing to keep them at home?
Good point, Ms. Miller. We do have the Florida Early Learning, the Office of Early Learning. Boy, too many names. The Office of Early Learning VPK division does have a website that has several options for parents, and that's where we've been referring them to. But on the other side of that, the flip side of that, why don't we offer a virtual position here at the district? And it's basically because around 80% of our curriculum is based on relationship and relationship building. When we look at language development, it does not occur by a flat screen. It occurs by interaction and the pragmatics of language. So those are the kinds of things that really are hindered by a virtual platform. The other issue that we come against is that we know that young children under age 5, should spend less than 2 hours a day on a screen, any kind of screen, from television, phones, computers. So we have to focus our understanding not only on what's best for kids' development, but what's best for kids in terms of their cognitive growth. So we have a lot of things, a lot of plates that we're trying to spin and keep up in the air and make sure the child doesn't come to kindergarten with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I thought you were just going to say funding, because that's because with all the technology we have, and as a former kindergarten teacher, the students that your demographic that you're pulling are kids that are in front of televisions a long time.
I know.
Because the parents are working, or there's multiple families and the grandparents are watching. I would like to access that. I mean, PBS is great, a learning start, but something from that, whether we provide it or not, even having live instruction, even if it's another person. I always thought it was dollars, but I understand your fundamental issue with technology.
There's so many things
Right.
attached to it. And of course, there's always dollars.
Right.
We always need money. And the children that we typically serve don't have packages on their cell phones that give them unlimited data. That's another restriction. Of course, the digital divide comes along with the great economic divide. So those are other pieces in tune.
Thank you.
But they can go to the Office of Early Learning website and get some options and some choices that are freebies.
Okay, thanks.
And to add to what Ms. Freed said, the one thing in early childhood is the socialization and their skills that they learn and they get by being with other children. When they enter kindergarten, it's usually lacking when they're not. You find that they're struggling more, and you find it more the males are the ones that struggle when they enter that age group, and that's where it is. So socialization, finding out their different modalities of learning and being able to touch that, those are all things in the primary stages in a kid's life that you want to grab early on, so you're not always trying to do a recovery mode when they enter kindergarten. And because that's what happens when we have kids in the first half of the year in kindergarten. We're trying to provide services that they miss during those pre-K and VPK times when we should have had them in front of an adult to teach that. The language acquisitions and different things, vowel, consonant, vowel, and those are all things that the adult learn, and they learn it better in front of an adult versus a piece of technology. Technology is great, but when you're trying to get those acquisitions down, for kids that do not have it, the adult is the one that gets that across better.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I just wanted to add that to that. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for what you do. Go find more babies. The next thing we have 2 information items, and I want to let the board members know that we will actually, since we're on schedule, have an executive session. The chair has granted an executive session between this meeting and the 3:30 hearing, so we will have an executive session. But the next item I want to bring for the 2 information items is the endowment report. If you recall, we're going to have all of our donations to be grouped monthly, so you can see the detailed expense items, the school, the donor. Those will be packaged for you monthly so that you can get a better look at what's happening and what's going. So we hope that is going to give you more information than you normally got when we just had them on the sheet, which we're doing. Item 6 is the Ana Menendez. That is an agreement that we've had for, I know since I've been here, with the university, and it's part of the strategic plan, which actually is presented, and it comes through, I believe, the PD department. With Cheryl Joe is what we have that now, and that is to actually help us with the affiliation that we have with that college in Polk County. It's been pretty successful, and that's why we continue to make sure there's no impact. For us, it's just making sure that we can connect with them and we keep that moving forward. Mr. Wilson.
I'm sorry, Madam Superintendent, could you talk about the endowment report again, please, just briefly?
Sure, we can have that. Come on, Mr. Perone knew this was going to come up. So he's actually a little proud of this report, so, as a finance guy. So.
Why are we calling it an endowment?
Proud, but, so we changed.
That's him.
Good afternoon, everybody. We changed the way we do donations. They used to be on your board agenda, which made it 6 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've started this new process where we'll show you on a spreadsheet every month or quarterly. So it's just something that IT set up and all the schools put in. It's pretty much the same, but you get the information differently.
But are these permanently restricted gifts?
I'm
So,
sorry.
I'm confused by the term endowment.
I think it's the endowment term.
Yeah, and when I saw that, I even had to ask Dr. Barrios, is this the apprise system, which is the donations? And we probably
Yes.
should have put it as donations
Okay.
instead of
So we
endowment.
really don't have
Yeah,
permanently
no.
restricted gifts that could be unrestricted for use for other things.
So we can change that name to where you understand it better. Okay. Ms. Reynolds, then Ms. Miller?
I just want to say thank you for this. It's always humbling to see all of the donations, but this format just makes it showing exactly where it goes, who it came from. Kudos to your team for putting this together, because just having that running list visually is very impactful.
Yeah, it allows the board to see who is given to what school, so you can, if you see them in the community, you can
Say
thank them
thank you.
personally.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Ms. Miller?
Mine might be a little bit later, but I just noticed when I was looking at our quarterly grant report, is that from your office?
Yes.
Okay.
Andy Baldwin's here if you have any direct questions on it.
Well, there's a grant contact name of an employee that's no longer with us. Are we going to update that to the new contact for some of these grants?
Yes.
Ms. Longa?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cunningham?
Yes, thank you, and I too want to say thank you. This is a wonderful opportunity for each of us to be able to have the report printed out, and as you indicated, thank those community leaders and community people and supporters of our schools, to thank them for their donations, their time, and so forth. So did I understand correctly, we are going to change the word endowment back to donations report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. Were there any other questions on the, I know Ms. Miller jumped to the grants.
Sorry.
Mr. Baldwin is here. Were there any other questions on the grants for the information item? Okay, none? Okay, thank you. At this time, Madam Chair, that concludes all discussion items and information items. I will now turn the agenda back over to you.
Wonderful, thank you, Madam Superintendent. Now, the next item for us is to go through, I think, are we going to go ahead and review our board agenda and complete this, and then we'll get to the executive session?
That's correct.
Okay. So, board members, if we can look at our school board agenda. Any questions from items 1 through the consent agenda, items 14? And if you just raise your hand visually so I can see it. Okay, next, looking at our regular agenda, any questions on items 15 through 20? Actually, 21. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Fields?
Number 8, Kathleen Middle School. I was wondering if Ms. Jackie can give us an update on where we are on the renovations for Kathleen Middle School.
I will, but I will yield that to Ms. Usher at this time.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yes, good afternoon. Mrs. Fields, we're working on Building 1, the historic building, where we're doing the roof right now. We received the drawings from Mike Furr to redo the entire building, so we will start that shortly to start the rest of the building. But right now, we're focusing on the roof at Kathleen Middle. The gymnasium, we gave that to SEMCO, you all approved it, so they're working on the roof for the gymnasium. We have the 16 classroom, replaced damaged roof with interior repairs, and the roof replacement is 100% done. Other little things that happen on campus with other buildings, our staff did. So the big project that's left right now is Building 1, doing all the interior work for the rest of the, in addition to the roof, which is like a $3 to $4 million job.
What's the anticipated finish date, estimated? Do you have one?
We're hoping to have it ready for next school opening.
Okay. Because I've had people wanting to know about it, so thank you for that.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, then Ms. Reynolds.
Ms. Usher, while you're here, what have we seen in the way of being able to complete the projects on time with COVID? Or have things been pushed back into the next year? Or do we have any major renovations or projects that we're going to complete this calendar year?
Mr. Wilson, I haven't changed any schedule. I mean,
Okay.
staff has been really working hard, keeping up with the projects and really complying with the COVID regulations also. So everything is still on schedule with 2 elementaries, 2 high school, and the 26th classroom addition at Ben Hill opening next year. So we hope to keep those on track. The elementary school is kind of tight because we haven't started construction yet, but we hope we'll have the Bailey Road and the Bellasita open also. The other projects, we're going through that right now. Those are big projects. We have like 3 pages of projects going on, gymnasium, cafeteria, walkways. But I'll come back to you with the revised capital plan. Even though, I mean, impact fees is okay, but the sales tax went down a bit, so we might have to push out some projects, so I'll review those with you. But the projects you all have approved, they're all on schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Reynolds?
I think you answered part of mine. So the elementary school B, 20B, that's the Bellasita, that's Davenport area?
Yes,
Correct? And the plan is for it to be open for 21, 22?
August 20, yeah.
So
August
next school year?
21, mhm.
Okay.
Right.
Awesome, thank you.
So, certainly, you're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Now, is there any other questions for Ms. Usher?
Not from Ms. Etcher, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Usher. Okay, so once again, items 1 through 14, any other questions before we move on the board agenda for tonight? Okay, seeing none, let's move on. Any questions from items 15 through 21?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just reviewing the report at number 15, they're stamped with work in progress. Are we approving this document that's fluid and changing, or is this a final draft?
Mr. Perone, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, you are approving a draft. It's still going on, and it will go on for another couple of weeks, but then the auditors will audit this and come back with a final document in
So we-
January.
Okay, that's what I wanted to confirm, a final document. Thank you. And on number 16, which is our testing schedule, I know that the superintendent is working with other superintendents and district staff is working to talk about accountability of those tests. And I know that we don't have a lot of options right now with the DOE, and now the federal government saying you'll provide those testing. There's no conversation of what the accountability will be. So as much as I support our staff, I will not be supporting the testing schedule as it's currently being sent from the DOE. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from items 15 through items 21 on tonight's agenda? Okay, we've reviewed our agenda. Next would be board member comments. I'm just going to start at one end and go around the table. Ms. Fields?
I don't have any comments, Ms. Cunningham.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Wilson?
No comments? Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Reynolds?
I just have a quick question. Do we have an update on when we'll have the timeline and schedule for superintendent search?
Yes, I have that here. That is in my board report.
Okay,
So,
thanks. I'll wait.
a forthcoming, Ms. Reynolds.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller?
No comments. Are we going to have a COVID update, Madam Superintendent, this evening, or?
If you would like, we can do it now, if you would
Okay.
like to have that. I did
Whatever's-
ask Mr. Hill, who stepped
Oh,
out.
he stepped out.
Because, and I'll start, do you want to go through this, and then you want us to come back, Madam Chair?
Sure, if you want to. I can go ahead and pass these out real
Okay.
quick, and then when Mr. Hill returns, if you'd like to have him do the update.
Yes,
How
thank
would
you.
that be?
That's great.
Okay, I only have one thing. I met with Mr. Reichert after our meeting last Thursday evening, and I do have a tentative timeline that I would like to pass out to the board and superintendent. So, let's see. I only made 10 copies at home, so if we need more, I can get them. 1, 2, 3 that way. There you go. And so what we did is after our work session last Thursday, you got one timeline, but because of the changes that we made, there are some other timelines here for you to peruse. I tried to keep most of the meetings on Tuesdays, because some were Mondays, some were Thursdays, some were Fridays. I preferred to kind of try to keep it on Tuesdays so that it would be uniform pretty much for everybody. So I would simply like to request board members, and for those that are not here, we have two that are not present today, Mr. Townsend and Ms. Fortney. While they're probably listening, they're not here physically. I'll make sure that these get put into your box at the district office so you can review them. Today is Tuesday. I'm asking that by Friday, if each of you would take the opportunity to review the dates and then let us know how that works with your schedule. If we need to change some, we can. Please note underneath the word timeline, it says the timeline is subject to revision by the board as needed. And once again, you can see the letters draft under this. This is not set in stone. This is an opportunity to move forward. And I will also see that Mr. Allen receives a copy as he's in the audience today. So he can start to put these dates on his calendar as well. So that's really all I had. Were there any questions? Yes, Ms. Miller.
Madam Chair, has this FSBA approved these dates so we can go ahead?
Yes, yeah, I worked with Mr. Reichert, Ms. Messina, and Dr. Vogel on these dates on Friday to make sure that I had something to hand out to you today.
Thank you.
So yes, ma'am. If this is good to the board, this would be good to move forward. So if you'll take some time at your leisure, look it over, and then let me know what you're thinking. If you would go ahead and send your comments or any changes that you need, if you would send them to Susan by this Friday, which would be the 11th, September the 11th, this Friday. I would greatly appreciate it so that we can move forward and go on. I have a question from Ms. Fortney.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I would ask that Superintendent Byrd please give us, this were part of my comments, an update on our class sizes. I'm still getting teachers that are stressing. Also, school nurses have reached out to me and was just hoping that she could give me an update on our class size issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fortney. Yes, Ms. Fields?
Just at a first glance, this looks much better than before. So I want to thank you all for being willing to go back and to revisit the timeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Byrd?
To the board and Madam Chair, I would also like to, because I know you got a website portal that needs to go up, looks like September 29th. And you and I did speak about having a person dedicated, and I would like to have Ms. Pleasant dedicated to this team for that study. So I want to make sure the board know that's who's going to be dedicated, because I know you got a lot of moving parts here. Yes. So Ms. Pleasant is aware, and she'll be ready for you to assist and make sure she can get in touch with the representatives from FSB as well.
Yes, and I did pass that along to them on Friday so that they know who the point person is, but I'll make sure to get them all her information. And just want to let the board know as we move forward with the search, Ms. Pleasant and her department are doing a very interesting take on the superintendent search. When we go to doing our marketing and advertising, I think the board will be pleasantly surprised and very excited as they move forward. They're not ready to unveil what they're doing yet, but they are working really hard to make us proud. So I think it'll be really interesting and a lot of fun as we move forward with our search. So any other comments on the timeline or the superintendent search? Okay, seeing none, Madam Superintendent, did you want to answer the COVID question with Mr. Hill?
Yes, Mr. Hill, the COVID update for this week is going to focus on what we're seeing in our schools as far as the cases, which Mr. Hill is leading that actual whole unit with Audrey Kelly and the Department of Health. He's been working with them with schools, so he has an update to provide you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Byrd. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So we have, for the last 2 weeks, learned an awful lot about our protocols and how we go about mitigating the impacts of COVID on our schools, our students, our staffs, and our communities. And so we have, as Ms. Byrd said, we have been working very closely, hand in hand, with the Florida Department of Health, Polk County. Mark Wilcox, our team there, has been working very closely with them as well. And then Ms. Pleasant and her team from Public Relations. And so what we've done is, we have, I'm looking at the numbers today, and we have had approximately 79 cases, positive cases, that we've contended with over the first 2 weeks. And thankfully, because of the work that we did prior to launching the new year, we have been able to work effectively, fairly effectively, I'd say very effectively, in working through the different scenarios and situations. We've been doing that case by case because each situation we found varies by school or by grade level. And we started out and we took a very, and this was my intentionality. We took a very cautious approach in terms of the contact tracing, determining the possible, those possible exposures, and then the quarantines. And so we did that by intentionality to ensure the safety and the well-being of our students and our staff. So that has gone well. We had hoped for the best, planned for these situations, and I think we all knew there were going to be cases. There were going to be positive cases that we were going to have to contend with. So we're still learning. We're learning every day. We did implement the September 1st, the CDC prevention and safety operations and the practices for critical infrastructure employees, and that basically allows an employee who does not have symptoms, that is asymptomatic, is feeling good, if they've been determined by the health department to be in a status where they have the opportunity, so they should so choose, to come back to work as long as they follow some very strict guidelines and continue to follow those guidelines while at work. They're still quarantined, but they have a provision to work. And so I'm thankful to report that we've received a tremendous amount of support from the health department. Our team at Mark Wilcox is doing an excellent job. Our principals, our teachers, our staffs are working diligently to follow the guidelines and to follow our safety practices and procedures. And so while we are contending with the positive cases, we are doing our very best to mitigate those. And we have had some cases, for example, it is reported a case, but it had no impact on the school because in some instances, those individuals were already quarantined. And so I would just emphasize to say, while we are working and being very strategic and surgical about that in regards to how the Department of Health is identifying those who are quarantined, we are also, over the last 2 weeks, have been very, very conservative and taken a very cautious approach to ensure the safety of our schools. If you have any questions.
Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hill, I really have two questions. The first question is, how are we identifying those students who, or those individuals who are testing positive? In other words, are they reporting to us? Are we catching them through our processes?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, other than Lakeland High School and Harrison, are the cases pretty isolated? Are we seeing instances where it's being passed to other students or other staff?
So I'll start with the first question. The notification process, it varies. We could receive notification from the school side of the equation where a parent calls in or notifies us. We can receive notification from the department, the health department. We can also receive notification typically from our team at Mark Wilcox. So the notification and how we get notified and how we become aware varies. But the procedure, if you will, or the protocol is essentially the same. Once we know about it, we're in immediate contact and direct contact with the health department and or Mark Wilcox, and then they are working in lockstep together. And then we have a team of about 6 of our staff that works closely to make sure that all those pieces get connected. Everything that we need to do to mitigate the situation gets connected, from the contact tracing. Our schools support that process, to cleaning of the classrooms, to making sure that the schools have everything they need to contend with the situation. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question, would you mind repeating the second question?
Well, I guess the second question is, it appears to me, at least from the
Yes.
casual observer, that
Right.
the outbreak at Lakeland Harrison was directly related to, it seems at least, folks not following our protocols. But are we seeing that anywhere else? Are we finding the
Right.
cases elsewhere are pretty much isolated?
So I appreciate you restating that question for me. I think the health department, and I don't want to speak for our leader there, team leader there, but in working closely with Scott, what we've been cautioned is, it is very difficult to trace the origin. So there's times the schools are being impacted from folks coming into the school, and there may be instances that is potentially could occur where it's transmitted at a school, but I would be very cautious in anyone trying to, well, I would be cautious in saying it's because we haven't followed protocol or practices or procedures. I mean, we are very diligent in that process. We are committed to that process. But we know we're a microcosm of society, and we're a microcosm of our community. And so when there's positive cases occurring in our community, we know we're going to contend with those. I just had this conversation yesterday evening about the fact that it's very difficult to determine the point of origin at times.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's not a criticism of staff.
Correct.
Not following protocols.
Yeah.
My concern all along has been the challenges we would have with students not following protocols.
Right. Our students have been amazing in regards to wearing their mask and doing a pretty good, I'd say a very good job of following protocols. Obviously, they're young people, and there's going to be instances, and probably have been instances where they could have done a better job. But I would say overall, they have far exceeded our expectation in terms of how they've worn their masks, followed their protocols. I watched a middle school get on buses the other day and was kind of very concerned about what it was going to look like when the bell rang, but was very pleased with how orderly they filed out, got on the buses, and it did some excellent spacing and walking in the same direction. So I think in the very beginning we said grace and mercy, flexibility. I think we also realize that we're striving for excellence and not perfection. And I appreciate you saying that, we're concerned about the young people following the protocols. And I think as we continue forward, I think as a community, Ms. Bird has sent a message out encouraging and reminding our parents that, hey, if your child is sick, it is okay to stay home. And in this environment, we understand that. As a matter of fact, we encourage that. And certainly if they've had a positive test, we want them to quarantine and stay home. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Miller?
Thank you, and I know you had some mic issues earlier.
sorry.
So not your fault.
Okay.
I just got notification they couldn't hear. I just want to
Okay.
repeat that we have 79 positive. Do you have the number we have?
Estimated 79. 'Cause I
Estimated.
yes, sir.
Do you have the number we have in quarantine? And if we have a ceiling, we have schools in this, we have charter, but we have some other schools in different counties that will close the schools that are more of a hotbed. Do we have a ceiling? First of all, how many people do we have quarantined? And do we have a ceiling from when we will look at a location and say, at this point, this location has multiple cases, it needs to go to e-learning for a few days?
Okay, so we do not have a number of, I don't have an exact number of quarantine with me today. And I've been working closely and following along with the state, not the state, the Department of Health in terms of how they report those. So we followed their suit in regards to the numbers of quarantine, and we focused on cases. That is something we can take a look at and get back to.
Would the Department of Health have the numbers that we quarantine?
We have reports that we'll be submitting to the state, so at some point, we'll get with them, and through guidance, we'll look at that and address that, and we'll talk to Ms. Byrd about that and work to get that basically.
Mr. Hill, if I
to
can
look
jump in, I
into
just
it.
want to
Thank
add
you,
one
Ms.
thing
Byrd.
to Ms. Miller's question. If you notice that we are really conservative, and we started out that way as when the Department of Health really threw the net when they had a case, they were very conservative to grab as many as they can because they did not know, to answer your question, secondary transmission, how that was going to look. So that's why that net and those numbers went wide. Every district, and I've talked to several superintendents, we're all up under Polk County is under Polk County's Department of Health. Orange County is under Orange County's Department of Health, and we all talk about why each one does it a little differently, and that's because of the Department of Health and how they're guiding us. And every case is different in every county, and I can tell you that there are some things that may not get reported out to us that we don't know what's happening in another county. But I can tell you when our quarantine numbers went out, the first thing, because I actually got on the call with the Department of Health to say, why are we throwing this net this wide? And it was because your first time in, we had no idea what we were going to look like. We don't know about secondary transmission, so they wanted to go as wide as they can before they dial it back in and say, let us really see what we're working with, because this was new to everyone and wasn't something that was coming into our buildings, and if we can keep it from transmitting in the buildings, that's why they were very, very conservative on that front. So those numbers I do know are probably greater, and they're greater all over because of that we're trying to do that.
Right.
I know Mr. Hill has also shared that some people that were captured in that were actually, they came back and they could have been tested and shown positive testing, but they were already quarantined because they were so conservative. So that's one of the things when we've been talking about, when do you dial that back in? When do you start saying, okay, now we don't have to go as broad? So hopefully that gives you some information and information to Mr. Wilson's question as well.
Yeah, I would like to get an update on that when you have it. I read one district was a little over 800 in quarantine, and that's what I've talked about when we go back to mandated testing of how these kids are going to learn, whether it's staff, we start talking about subs. And I would like to have an idea, even if it's a range of where we are in the quarantining, which I think we had talked earlier, Madam Superintendent, that we are looking at it differently, which I think is good if we are going to expect those kind of testing to take place, just to have people in the building to administer the academics. My last question, and people are going, we've talked about putting a cap on going back and forth from virtual or e-learning to classroom, and I know I talked to the superintendent that you thought maybe after the holiday we would put some kind of timeline on it, but I still get parents who have tried virtual who realize it's not going to work for them, or teachers, that could go back and forth. Is there a definite deadline when we're going to say, you know what, you need to stick with your option so we can get numbers, or are we still going to have that window where they can switch?
So I will address that, and this will also capture Ms. Fortney's question, because being in education, and whenever we used to start the school year this late, most of our children show after Labor Day, and we anticipated the influx after that. Therefore, what we did, instead of having our 8-day count, which we normally say this is what we call day certain, no more movement about the cabin at this point, we moved it out to this Friday to see, because yes, across the state, if you look at the numbers, they're low. But we know and we anticipate we could send influx coming in. At that time, we are going to make a district call to, we cannot keep moving back and forth. One, it impacts our staff, our transportation, and our classrooms. So we can't keep moving about. I know the parents, it's going to be a hard adjustment. They're not going to like it. However, we got to stabilize at some point. So we're waiting to see what happens come Friday and what class sizes actually look like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Ms. Reynolds?
Thank you. I have a few questions. The first one is for Ms. Barrios. Do we have a computers update and how many we have, how many we're waiting for?
So the first 10,000 that we ordered back in April are all in, and they are being distributed. I think we may have a few more deliveries this week. We ordered another 10,000, 5,000 iPads and 5,000 HP devices. The 5,000 iPads are actually in. My challenge right now is we don't have the cases for them. So they're telling me the cases are 3 to 4 months out. So literally just
Yeah.
20, 30 minutes ago, Michelle and I were saying, what can we do? Do we want them to sit? We can't pass them out without some sort of protective covering. So I'm trying to figure out something creative where we can get those out to the schools, and they can use them until the actual keyboard cases come in. We've done a lot of research, but again, unfortunately, they're delayed. The HPs, they're telling me, should be in sometime mid-October, so we're keeping our fingers crossed that those other 5,000 will be in. I'm working right now on distributing the second 10,000, where they're going to go. So, we did the first group. I'm going back now and sort of plugging in, also wanting to wait. I'll take a closer look Friday when we get more stabilized numbers, but I'm working on those 10,000 now. So that's
Okay.
kind of where we are. And we're at the mercy of ship delays and parts
Supply chain.
delays and all of those.
Do we have any update from schools that are still waiting to distribute to e-learning students? Or with the latest shipment that came in, have we been able to get
It has
to most, if not
stabilized
all?
toward
Okay.
the end of last week. It has stabilized. I have not heard any more like we're running out and we need devices now. So I think they've pretty much been able to manage with those requests that they've had.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all my questions on computers. I just want to give a shout out to our network managers because I got to help pass them out at Winter Haven High School, and Austin Dollison there is doing an incredible job of getting them reformatted. He has it down to a science when they come back in. But I don't think anyone ever expected a school network manager to be as a hectic job as it has been the past few months, and they are all rising to the occasion. So I just want to give a shout out to your team there.
Yep,
'cause
they
they're
do a
doing
great job.
My next question is, and I think the superintendent answered this a little bit with contact tracing. Are we seeing any trends of the ones that are on quarantine, going back and looking at the seating charts that were submitted, how close they were in contact to the other cases at that school? I know some of our teachers had some concerns of, okay, I had to submit a seating chart so that we could contact trace based on a seating chart, but then they took out the whole class, no matter where the student was sitting. So do we have any updates on that? Are we going to be able to, I know you said that they're looking to rein it in, but are we going to continue wiping out full classes?
Well, I'll let, I see Mr. Hill, I'll let him chime in to that one. But I do know that when they're looking, when you're throwing that net, you're looking at that chart, but then from that chart, they ask questions,
Right.
which actually drills them to where they may have to look at more students or more people that's
Gotcha.
been around. It's sometimes just not a chart, it's the questions that
Okay.
come after that.
Right.
And Mr. Hill, I don't know if you want to add to it.
That's exactly what's occurring, Ms. Byrd, thank you. So, they have become more surgical and are utilizing the seating charts.
Okay.
But situations are very different. A secondary classroom sets up and interacts very differently than an elementary classroom. And as Ms. Byrd said, when they begin to ask the questions and they drill down, that's when they are able to make those determinations in terms of the quarantine status. And if I could, I really wanted to just I appreciate Ms. Byrd emphasizing that we did cast a wide net, and that was by intentionality. And so those numbers probably are higher than they may be at some point as that process of dialing it in gets more refined. And so we'll work to get those numbers. I do have some numbers, but for clarity, I don't have an update on it. So in regards to that.
Okay. I have two more questions, and
Okay.
I promise I'll be done.
You're
As
fine.
far as our quarantine numbers and our number of active cases,
Mm-hmm.
will we be keeping a rolling list? For example, I know we had a case the first day of school, which is 15 days out now, so they should be returning and no longer on quarantine. So will we be keeping a list of how many active cases we have versus how many cases we've had since the start of school? Or is that something that we
That's a great question.
can do?
We're working on that. We're working through that, and it kind of gets very
Right.
complex in moments and times, but they're keeping very accurate information. They're keeping the return dates, the dates when they think the exposure happened and occurred.
Sorry, there's an Amber
That's
Alert.
it.
Sorry, just the Amber Alert.
Stayed counting.
So they are tracking those dates, and that's something I can follow up with. And we're working through those dynamics.
Awesome.
The tracking
the data. You're talking about the data and the reporting pieces.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. And then my last question is, do we have updated numbers of on-campus versus e-learning? And what, I know when the last time that we got an update, I think it was 46 and 47%. From being at Winter Haven, it seems like a lot more starting to come back than we originally anticipated. So just curious if we have updated numbers and how that's affecting staffing. Obviously, if we have more students on campus, we'll need more teachers on campus.
Right,
So I
so
don't know if
we did have, I want to make sure I'm quoting this right because it's not in front of me. I believe it was 86,000, am I correct? 83? Okay, I'm trying to get 3 more. 83,000 last week. But again, if you will allow us to hold out to Friday,
Okay.
because we probably will see a surge, at least we're hoping that we'll get those babies in and they're still calling, and we will send the updated ones to you, and then by then we can send them to you by school as well.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm more so concerned as far as students are returning, not just to Polk County schools, but
Right.
whether it's e-learning or on campus, how
We'll
the
send,
staffing
we'll send
needs
both
are,
to
so
you.
that'll
We'll
help.
make sure we
Okay.
send both so you can see where they are and where they're residing at, because it is going to impact our work as far as what we see in e-learning versus Polk virtual and what's happening actually on campus. So if you give us through Friday till we get day certain, then we can provide that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Mr. Wilson? Oh, Ms. Fields?
Kind of tie into the count of the students. Ms. Jackie, I know that we've had a lot of students who started out with online learning, and then they rush back for brick and mortar. So when you are gathering the data, can you kind of break that out or estimate it out or whatever? It'd be interesting to see what kind of impact that's had, because I know a lot of people thought that the online learning was easy. At least I did, and it's definitely not easy. It's very challenging for elementary age kids, I think. And then I really think we need to visit when we want receiving more students back and forth, because I think that really impacts the staff, and it impacts the kids too, I would think.
We will. So what we'll do to the board is, once we get day certain numbers, I'll see you probably the 5-day count, and we'll send you the 8-day. I don't know if we broke it out by school by then. We did. So what we can do is line it up so you can see. It'd be hard for us to tell you which kid actually showed up. But what you can see, if you got, say, Arbondale High School, not picking on Mr. Hill over there, but if you have Arbondale High School, you can see it on day 5, day 8, and then out day 14, and you can see campus and e-learning. So you can see if those numbers are growing, if one is decreasing, one is growing. So we'll send that to you, and we'll make sure you get that. I can tell you that firsthand. I've been in the school, and I was there when a parent brought back the iPad and said, you can take it back. It was at 9:45. Not even, just an hour and 45, so you could take it back, and the child is already here, put them back on campus. So it is quite difficult, but you know what? We would gladly take those babies back on our campus and do our job of educating them.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Wilson?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Superintendent Burt and her staff for their aggressiveness in identifying and setting up our protocols, and number 2, enforcing them. You know, I think one of the things we've seen nationally with schools that failed in return of their students to the traditional classroom environment, the brick and mortar environment, was, first of all, they had poorly defined protocols, and second, the ones they did have, they weren't enforcing. So thank you for doing that. You know, I know our students and our staff appreciate that so much. But my real question, I think you hit on the core of my question, and that is secondary infections. And have we seen any instances of that we feel we're pretty clear were secondary infections?
So am I talking with Scott on Friday? He did not tell me he can tie anything to secondary transmission in our building. And that's always my question to him. Can we tie it to a building? Because if he ties it to a building, we need to pay close attention to what's happening in that building. And at that time, he could not tie it to a building with a secondary transmission. And I would also like to add is that we actually have testing sites that's dedicated for our students and our staff. And it's 3 of those that we have dedicated. So anytime we can send them there, they make an appointment, they can get right in through the Department of Health. And I believe, and I know I'm kind of going off your question a little bit, but I have point of privilege right here. I believe we're getting some extra funding, Mr. Perone, and we haven't gotten it yet, we were told. And I asked Ms. Perone to dedicate that into at least getting some additional tests for our clinics. Am I correct? That's where we're putting them? Okay. Okay. Oh. So I wanted to make sure we had enough on, so if we had our own staff and our kids, we can actually help and get them there too, trying to get those resources out there as well. But no, they have not verified secondary in the building to me as of today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any other comments, board members? Yes, Mr. Bridges.
Madam Chair, on the administrative side of things.
Yes, sir.
The people who are in the business of drafting executive orders have been fully employed. We are up to 213 executive orders out of the governor's office so far this year. On Friday, the governor signed Executive Order 213, which it extends the executive order that originally created the state of emergency. 20-52 is extended by 20-114, which was extended by 20-166, and has now been extended by 20-213. So the state of emergency has been extended for another 60 days as of September the 4th. So that will extend through the first week of November. What we do not know right now is whether Executive Order 20-193, which extended Executive Order 20-69, and that is the one that allowed for virtual board meetings without a physical quorum. We do not know whether that will be extended. Right now, that order will lapse at the end of this month. Joy Frank has indicated she's reaching out to see if that's going to change. But the state of emergency has been extended until November, but the order on physical quorums and virtual meetings has not yet been extended. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Thank
Thank you so much for that.
Ms. Cunningham?
Yes, I hear Ms.
Hand's
Cunningham.
been
Ms.
up,
Fortney.
Lisa. Yes, thank you. First, I think what Superintendent Byrd said was exactly the answer I was talking about with the class size. I believe that migration is just flooding some of our teachers and, schools and classrooms, and they're not able to social distance. But my question now is for Mr. Hill. Let's say that somebody is out 14 days with quarantine. Are they allowed back, staff or students, if they have produced a negative test?
Ms. Fortney, my understanding is you cannot test yourself out of quarantine. So you have to do the full 14 days in that scenario.
Thank you. I've had that question. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Mr. Townsend?
Hi, everybody. Sorry I had to join late. Quick question on the moving back and forth. Is the 9-week rule still in effect? Like that at the end of nine weeks there's a reassessment of things?
Who would like to answer?
Are you talking about regarding class size?
Right. If you're an e-learning student at the end of nine weeks, if you decide to go back to brick and mortar, you can do that, or vice versa. That's how we had talked about it at the beginning. I just wanted to make sure that was still in place, and that what you were saying about cutting things off this Friday did not apply to that.
Well,
or does it?
Again, Mr. Townsend, we're going to look at the numbers, because anytime they move about, you have to remember that you could be impacting a teacher. So what could happen if we say, yes, we're going to let them, and you get an influx of 20 for one class with no teacher, that's going to be that teacher. So we'll provide clarity once we see numbers on Friday, if you'll allow us to provide the clarity of where we're going to go forward from there.
Okay. Well, I mean, we did make the point about, we sort of said this repeatedly, that it was going to be an every 9-week thing. So I just want to make sure that that's being addressed.
We'll let you know Friday, and we'll monitor it. And quite frankly, at some point, you have to kind of stop the movement in order to get stabilization in the classroom. And so Friday will give us a better indicator of what we need, and hopefully at that point, you won't be moving about, because usually once you stabilize after the count, you don't see that going back and forth in a normal year. So we'll have better clarity of what the numbers look like, if we're still low in enrollment, or where we're going, so we will provide that information back to the board.
Well, but again, I just want to be clear, like, almost all of these meetings over the summer was repeatedly said, each 9 weeks, this is not a normal year. Like, what the mantra that was repeated over and over again is we're going to ask folks to assess it on a 9-week basis, with the idea that you could move one way or the other each 9 weeks. I totally get not doing it in the middle of the 9 weeks, but I think that's something that was communicated pretty broadly to the public. So I'd be very cautious about changing that.
Right, we understand. I believe you're probably talking about the innovative part of the plan, when we had some teachers on site and teaching kids that were probably on campus and then having them virtually. Is that the part of the plan you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about from a parent or student's point of view. What was said was that we're going to ask students to do this at a 9-week basis. Like, if you choose e-learning, it's for 9 weeks. We're asking for that kind of commitment from you, and then at the end of 9 weeks, you can see, like that was the pretty clear message, that we didn't want you going back and forth between the 9 weeks. In fact, I think we've been pretty lenient about that so far. But there was an idea that it could be reassessed at the end of the grading period from a parent or kid's point of view. And I think most people thought they were buying into a quarterly commitment rather than a year commitment. That was the point of that. So I want to make sure, if that's a change, we better communicate that.
Well, again, it's going to be the need of the students based on for the teachers. So usually once they settle, you don't see that back and forth a lot. But let us get the numbers and let us see where the students are and where teachers are on Friday. But usually once they settle, and I get what you're saying on the 9 weeks, they want to come back in, but if you don't have a teacher out there at that point, we have to address it that way. So usually we will settle by the end of, hopefully by the end of Friday. I'm hoping everybody's going to settle in at that point. Okay, so we'll provide that, and if we need to provide more clarity at that time, we will.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Townsend. Okay, I believe that concludes our work session today, if there are no more comments or questions by the board. So I would like to end our work session today for September 8th, 2020. And at this time, I would like to take a 15-minute break. So we would reconvene at 2:20 for an executive session. I would need to ask everybody in the room if you would be so kind and please leave the room. As the only folks that are able to stay for executive session, Mr. Bridges, that would be the board members, yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Board members,
Yourself and appropriate staff.
Administrative staff, and
Yep.
the finance staff that's making the presentation.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you very much. So we'll see you back here, let's say at 2:20. 2:20 for executive session. Thank you.